As many of you know, these seminars are a space for all of our cohorts. So we have three cohorts now and placed across the resource challenge districts of UP, Jharkhand, MP, Chhattisgarh, and Bodoland, as I was just saying. And here we come together and engage with urgent questions of development and governance guided by thought leaders and sector professionals. A special welcome to our third cohort, for whom this marks the beginning of the virtual academic journey. And we truly couldn't have asked for a more fitting theme or a more inspiring speaker to begin with. While Dr. Nirmala Murthy requires no formal introduction, it is my pleasure and nonetheless an important formality to offer a brief introduction to someone whose work continues to inspire all of us. Dr. Murthy is the founder president of the Foundation for Research in Health Systems, an institution she established in 1989. Under her leadership, FRHS has pioneered impactful research and policy engagement in the field of maternal and adolescent health, child health and nutrition, and reproductive health, making substantial contributions to public health discourse and practices in India. She has also served as a faculty member in the public system groups at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, where she taught for nearly 2 decades. Over the years, she has advised global development organizations such as World Bank, DFID, and UNICEF on large-scale monitoring and evaluation of reproductive, maternal, and child health programs. What truly distinguishes Dr. Murthy's work is her commitment to evidence-based, equity-oriented health system research. One of her landmark studies explored women's experiences of mistreatment during childbirth in health facilities, a subject often narrated qualitatively. Uniquely, this was a quantitative study that used the gender equitable men scale to examine how women's views on gender roles influence their treatment during childbirth. The research demonstrated that women with equitable gender views were less likely to report mistreatment, opening up new conversations about the intersection of empowerment, gender norms, and maternal health. Another notable area of work is the use of technology in strengthening health systems, especially in the last mile. Well before the current wave of digital health initiatives, Dr. Murthy led studies on the use of mobile phones by frontline health workers, identifying technology as a critical enabler for enhancing productivity and service quality. Her 2012 study on pregnancy registration systems highlighted how digital innovations can improve the registration of pregnancies and birth, helping to reduce maternal and infant mortality through timely care and systematic accountability. Today, as we find ourselves in an era of rapid health system digitalization, from Arogya Setu to UP's Mantra app, the foresight of Dr. Murthy's work could not be more relevant. She has long emphasized the importance of linking technology with inclusive governance, data-driven planning, and health equity. In this seminar, as we confront widening inequalities, climate-linked health disruptions, and the rise of non-communicable disease and pandemic risk, we have an opportunity to reflect a critical question of how do we reimagine public health systems to be resilient, equitable, and inclusive. We will engage with questions such as what is the current status of India's public health system? How can we understand health systems through the lens of public administration and lived experience? In what ways are they shaped by political, economic, and social context? What steps can be taken by district administrations to ensure sustainable last mile health service delivery? Through Dr. Murthy's insights, we hope to deepen our understanding of the intersection between health system and society and strengthen our collective community commitment to build on empathetic, inclusive, and evidence-based public health response. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Nirmala Murthy. And over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shruti. The introduction was much too long, more than I deserve, but thank you. Um, can we begin?
Sure, ma'am. All yours.
Okay. Um, I I'm one of the reluctant speakers, as Shruti can tell you. I told her that she is asking wrong person now. I've been out of doing active research for about 4 5 years, and having worked in this field for more than 50 years, I deserve to be taking time off. But she said, no, please, we would like to hear you. So here you are. Um, and you're asking me to reimagine public health system. So I kind of found it interesting because I had never thought about it. And so it gave me an opportunity to look at what is it that is currently relevant that I can speak of. I would try to keep between Hindi and English wherever possible. And please, you can, if you have any questions, something is not understood, you can put it on your question and we'll try to answer if possible while speaking. Uh, Now, just when I started thinking about this topic, I found that everybody is looking at how can they reimagine different fields, reimagining education, reimagining health, reimagining something else. And I said, what is happening? Why is everybody reimagining? And it seems that they are reimagining because of this huge change in the technology, the AI coming in, and uh, technology, IT technology, and so on. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to address this challenging type topic because what I have experience is learned over 50 years when I was struggling with how to make the public health system very effective, equitable, easy to access, and so on. Where technology was not a big part of it. It slowly grew and it was a simple technology. So, at the outset, I must tell you that I'm not going to talk about the advanced medical or information technology, how it can play any role to address these issues, because I'm sure it does. But the medical technologies have already shown that they can conduct surgeries sitting in Bangalore, somebody can be operated in another country, which is almost a last mile delivery. You can do it directly. That's what the technology is. But then you can say, oh, but only rich people can afford that. And it's not equitable. I agree. It's not right now equitable. But I'm not very sure that another 10 years down the line you would say that. Because you remember we had mobile phones and few years ago we didn't think all of us, even my maid servant will carry her mobile phone and be watching her movies on the smartphone. But that has happened. They can afford, and technology probably can make a huge difference. So, may that as it is, and let us now turn to the task right now, and that is to the issues that Shruti has kindly listed for me as to reimagining how the public health system would be that will ensure the resilience, equity, and last mile service delivery. Am I going slow enough, or is it okay? The speed is okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Uh, to tell you my first reaction to this topic was, why am I, reimagining is, we have been doing in this public health field for a long time. The first imagining happened in 1946, just when I was born. And there was a war committee you might have read, and I don't know whether you had a chance to read a couple of articles that I had requested you to glance through, but if you're not, maybe sometime you can find time to do so. But that war committee report, we everybody, is a landmark, and we says that it, that time in 1946, said that the health care should be freely available to all. It should be state sponsored, supported, paid by government through our revenue, decentralized, and community participation. The community should be involved. So it is, they're all elements of universal health program is already there. that was the that was the image, or that was the imagination of the board committee so many years ago. And I hope we haven't reached there. We are not. We are on the way. And maybe by 2046 we might. But between the after that, several other committees came, Mudliar committee, and the committee names also I don't remember, Kartar Singh committee and so on, which sort of tried to water down that commitment to universal health program, to say that yes, it is very important, useful, that's a goal, but we can only do this much. So we can slowly, we can have primary health care, we can have selected primary, so few activities, only family planning, and so on. So we were kind of going step by step towards improving public health program, but not reaching universal health access. We had now next the most another next more sort of reimagining happened as a national health policy came in 1983. Then came in 2002 another policy. The third is 2017. Each one of these is a reimagination of the public health program. And what was changing in, if one looked at those three policies very superficially, because I want to cover a big sort of agenda in about 40 to 45 minutes. So what is it that the way I looked at it, the major change that happened was the way they saw the changing space given to private sector. In 1983, government said we will do everything. We don't need private sector to be meddling. It's a private health is public health is our responsibility. And the perspective that was a clinical mostly. That is clinical means there will be diagnosis, there is a treatment, and people, poor people, everybody will get treatment in the um, primary health centers or the public health facilities where there are hospitals, and government will take care of them. Come 2002, we were a little more open to private sector and said we cannot deny their existence, so we should collaborate. And then come 2017, we are even co-opting them, so that government, they join in the government programs, so Ayushman Bharat, insurance schemes and so on. So we see more and more involvement of private sector and a larger, so it's becoming larger and larger system. So but the other thing that I notice, and all of you should, and that's what I would like to emphasize, is the underlying clinical perspective is emphasized in our health program. We call it a public health program. What it means is it's a public. The word is used in means government health program. It's not necessarily public health perspective. The difference is that public health perspective is on the prevention of the problem. So when there are diseases, we think of not diagnosis and treatment so much as how does one prevent them so that cases will be fewer and fewer. That is the objective of prevention. So I'll tell you a small sort of experience to where I learned this perspective very vividly. I had a sort of teacher and a friend, one Dr. Devdar, who was a surgeon by training and also public health specialist and work in the Maharashtra government. And he told me his story, how he used to operate. So he was on the a dam. He was appointed to the dam site to take care of the health of the people, treat them. And when he joined there, he found that he used to treat some every day 40 to 50 patients. They were all coming with stomach problem, vomiting, this, that, other. It about 3 4 days was very busy, and then he realized that he needs to do something different. So he went to market, bought two big drums, filled them with water, got the collector to treat that water, issue orders to people that they will drink water only from those from those drums and nowhere else. And in about 3 4 days, his patient load came down to about 2 3 people per day, and everybody was working happily. And he learned to play bridge. So he said that is the perspective of a public health. When we talk about public health, is the focus is on prevention. But over time, as I see more and more, we talk about treatment, diagnosis, adding specialties, and so on. So to a large extent, resilient that's an issue that we would have to keep in mind, that is that how much of our public health system is really preventive care. And preventive care means you would have to worry about um, the nutrition, water, sanitation, environment, pollution, all those factors, and the risk and the lifestyle. So all those factors come in play when we have to work on the prevention part. And so as long as if we only look at how many cases came and how many were treated, um, we are only doing clinical work sitting in a public health facility. That's point number one that I would like to emphasize as I go along. And part of it is happening also because if, for example, Dr. Devdar was to be evaluated by number of patients he treated, his performance would be treated as low because he was treating only 2 to 3 patients, because patients people didn't fall sick. Now people, we should be happy that people don't fall sick, while we are now looking at all the time thinking about number of people came, number of patients, number of people who were treated, number of people sort of given medicines and so on. And so that is a, but is sort of a system which is a positive loop system. Instead of worrying about why are we treating so many patients, why are so many people coming with these problems, and how can I stop, how can I reduce those numbers. So that is one thing that is kept to be kept in mind as we discuss further. Um, so the next question, so we would like, what can we say about the current status of public health system in India? um, and you are, and most of us are looking, when we talk about public health, as I said, we talk only about the government. But it's a huge, huge, huge system if you step back. And what is it? It is a layered government system. There are 5 layers. There is a ASHA and Anganwadi at the village level. There is a sub-center of about for every 5,000 population. There is a primary health center for every 30,000 population. There is a doctor there. There is staff there, 2 doctors, not even one doctor. In some places, even 3 doctors working at the level of 30,000 population. Working means appointed at the level of 30,000 population. Then there is a community health center or rural hospital, which is for the about between 50, 60,000 to 100,000 population. And then there is a district hospital, and then there are medical college and specialty hospitals. So there are 5 layer government health system. Then there is a equally almost 5 layered private sector system. There are rural medical practitioners who are practicing in each of the villages. Though don't want to recognize them, we don't want to even know that they exist, but they exist and they treat people. Then there are pharmacists who give medicines because people go to them in the rural areas, take medicines from them. Then there are single doctor clinics. Then there are nursing homes, and there are charity hospitals or general hospitals. And then there are specialty and corporate hospitals. So that's also a very large and system. And there is a Ayush system. Okay? That is we have India has been, not just India, but I think the world over, we think that medicine and treatment began with allopathy. No, no, all of us had our traditional system. There was Ayurveda, Unani, and then Chinese had their system, Africans had their system. So all of us, all societies have been trying to uh, trying to do something to cure diseases and to keep people healthy. In fact, Ayurveda has far more broader perspective of how to keep people healthy and how people should live and how they should be comfortable. And so treatment is a smaller part of their system, but they exist. And we have that Ayush system now that it has traditional healers. There are home remedies, which again we don't recognize. Then there are clinics by Ayush doctors. Then there are Ayush hospitals, and then there are wellness centers, and there are very sophisticated centers where even England's king and queen come and live. So we have that range of alternate medicine available. So what it means is that people have many options, and patients get to decide. And that's a unique thing about Indian medical or public health system, is that people have to decide where to go for what treatment to take. Nobody else tells them. Each of them each of them treats in their own way. The allopathy doesn't know anything about Ayurveda. Ayurveda doesn't know anything about allopathy, and traditional medicine the people take, but we don't recognize. So people may do correct things, wrong things, whatever, but people are free to choose. And that's when I begin to ask, is it really a system? We keep using the word system as if they relate to each other, they learn from each other, they talk to each other. No, nothing like that. They don't talk to each other, they don't collaborate with each other, they don't try to arrange treatment with each other. So what we have is this chaotic, large health system. Um, and again, I use the word system. No, they're units which are treating people and of many things and different ways. And poor patient has to decide, not has to decide, but decides where to go. Now, generally, one should be happy about having so many options, that we don't have to depend on going through a system where we say that you go to first to the sub centers, and if she A&M says you can go to the primary health center, then only you go there. And if primary health center doctor refers you to the hospital, then only you go there. That also doesn't work. People decide they will go directly to the specialist, they go to the specialist. And the specialist doesn't say, why didn't you go to a general practitioner first? Now, given that kind of behavior of patient behavior, and the system's behavior of not controlling, naturally there is a chaos. There are hospitals which are overloaded. Then there are centers where nobody is there, nobody comes. Because nobody comes, patients don't go there. So given that there is so much of, we have health resources, and there is seems like a chaos that people are not getting quality care when and where they should need. So this is kind of a broader picture I would I have seen happen, and I think it continues. Now, you must tell me whether any of these things have changed, because you are in the field now, you see different things, and I told you I have stopped looking at it for about now 5 to 6 years. So I would like to learn from you where things have now changed. Now, given that we have this big system, and even though it is a chaos, it has still achieved a lot. But it has achieved, we have become life expectancy, they say. We have, when we became independent, there's 32 years, then now it is 68 years, double, more than double. And this has happened mainly because of the reduction in the infant mortality rate. And some of you may know that the main factor determining life expectancy is in India at least, it's the infant mortality rate, which was 130 about 20 years ago, is now only 34. Maternal mortality has gone down by one third. Then birth rate have come down, family sizes have come down from 5 to 2 or 2.5. That means there are fewer children, more care, and so on. But and also incidence of communicable diseases have gone down. That is the vaccine preventable diseases, measles, diarrhea, ARI. All this data is from the NFHS 5, NFHS 3, which shows that major health indicators have improved in the country. What has not improved is the malnutrition. Children are more children are malnourished. Then there are more lifestyle diseases, diarrhea. The diabetes, heart, and so on, cancer. Those uh, cancer I wouldn't now call as a lifestyle, but more of the heart problems and diabetes and uh, asthma, and those are the problems have increased. Risk factors have increased. People using alcohol, tobacco, stress, unhealthy lifestyles, that has increased. Food, unhealthy food, and that has increased. Now, to keep so all these increases are, even though our preventive care in a sense that has worked well and has reduced um, infant mortality, and that has happened mainly because of the deliveries in institutions, in the hospitals, both private and the government hospitals. Earlier we used to have about 30% hospital deliveries taking childbirth taking place in hospital. Today we have more than 85, 90%, 85%. And that is happened because of the incentives given to start with. It, people, women are offered to are given nearly 6,000 rupees in most states, where to have delivery in, take their antenatal care plus have delivery in the hospital. And there are ashas and health workers supporting that, and they are also incentivized to uh, promote institutional delivery, and that has actually helped. Within about 10 years we have reduced mortality very rapidly. And one would probably ask, what happens if you stop the incentive? Would they continue? And my guess is yes, they will continue, because now it has become a habit. People expect to go to hospitals. People expect that they have now realized that that's a safe thing to do. Men support that their wives should survive and that she should have deliveries in the hospital. And so there are some major, there's also positive changes that have happened.
Ma'am, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you. Could you keep the camera? Your face is partly visible. A little bit lower. Um, it's still,
Let me see.
yeah,
Is it okay?
yeah. Now it's okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Ma'am, if you can tilt it a little bit more lower, that would be a little better. Yeah.
Is it better? I should not move also then. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. This is better.
All right. Okay. Now, we have a lot to be proud of, that India has achieved so much in spite of the poverty, in spite of the chaos, and in spite of many health systems working. We have still achieved something. But then there are major concerns, and the concerns are that the achievements are not uniform. That some states, and I know I have worked in UP for many years. I was in fact born in UP, for example, but worked in UP, and then there are some states and some that's where the the achievements are not there is a the gaps are large among poor and rich. The gaps are large, and just that's a concern. Then there are large gaps are there because rural and urban areas have much better facilities. 70% of the people live in rural areas, 70% of the facilities are in urban areas. That's the old statistics, and that continues. And that those are the concerns with the administration when they look at it uh, as a person, as a citizen. I see, okay, I have a lot of facilities. I have options to choose where I get my care. But when the administrators look at it, and that's the question Shruti put it, is that how does it look? How does the system look from the public administration point of view? Now, where you people are located, so for public administration, they must have a system. That means a well structured system. You should know there are some rules, who does what, who is reporting to whom, who is authority to decide. So all that is have to be spelled out. And how, and then some controls, that how much, how what would be the staff, how would they work, where would they go, what will they do. All those rules are expected, and unless those are there, administration doesn't feel comfortable. But our mixed system is a chaos. So it is, uh, people don't, we are not used to following any such structure. Many efforts have been put in. When I was in almost 30 years ago, we tried a lot to get the referral system working. Okay, referral system means we'll say, all right, people should first go to sub centers, and since we know that about 70-80% of the health problems can be sorted out right there, and then some will go to primary health center where there is a doctor, and then he will refer patients to hospitals if a hospital has a hospital or a more specialized uh, thing is needed, and so on. So there was a referral system where we used to have experiment done, the referral system. And many hospitals, we had one in Pune, along with the KEM hospital, Pune. But very soon we found out that it will fall apart. And the reason it will fall apart, because the higher level system will not refer back the patient to the lower level. That means if a patient goes from, say, PHC to the hospital, say, they will not tell the PHC doctor what happened to that. They will treat him and he goes out. Now that patient knows that he was treated at the hospital. He didn't. So he says this, that why am I going to go to PHC? Let's go to the hospital anyway. That is where the treatment is. And so he also tells others, why do you go to PHC? And all of them start going to hospital. And the hospital doesn't stop them. In fact, to one of the things that we had noted that, and probably it exists, that if doctors at the PHC or at the lower level, if he writes a prescription, he has done a diagnosis, he has written a prescription, or even he has a diagnosis and sends him to the higher level. They don't even look at the diagnostic or whatever paper he has been, throw away in the basket, saying that seen him as a new case. Now I remember one woman, I mean, talking with her when we were implementing this. She said she had her child had died, and the child was some 2 years old. I said, what happened? And she had gone from PHC to PSC to SIP center to hospital and so on. And at every place she said, I told them what the problem is, but they didn't even hear me. They just gave me the same medicine again and again, which was not working. And by the time she reached the hospital where the child had real serious problem, the child died. Now, her complaint was, and if she goes through this kind of structure system, and people don't look at what the diagnosis is and what the past treatment has been, and that it has not worked, how come they didn't say think about the next thing, that this doesn't work, let me go to the next system. And that this is the now, even now I think, and that is where I would like your input. Even now it doesn't happen. No, they don't look at the referral. That was one part of it. The second one, we have tried doing sort of build linkages between the private sector and the government sector, or in the tertiary care in the private sector, and that was done for during the HIV period. We knew that first referral or first person that people contact in rural areas as well as any area is the local doctor, or they, if they have a family doctor, if they're local doctor or whatever. And if they and then that doctor, if and those HIV people didn't know enough about it in the initial stages, and that places, if they do not diagnose it and they do not treat them, the treatment was available only at the higher level hospitals. So we thought we would have the some training program or collaboration of all the private practitioners who this was done in one of the Karnataka districts, is that, and then link them with St. John's hospitals in Bangalore and the tertiary care where the real treatment was available. So uh, these private doctors will inform and take their advice of the specialist from and treat them. Treatment has to be done at their level. Only they will get learning, and they will get the diagnosis, they will get the corrective treatment, and so on. And our doctors were, the private doctors, very, very reluctant to, out of I think something like 50 or 60 doctors we had in that experiment, only two doctors were willing to send or did send their patients. All of them were treating one or two patients, but they sent them to, or willing to even refer them, because they are afraid of losing this patient. But these hospitals will not send them. So that kind of the focus, what we learned through that is, we are not, the system is not focusing on the health of the patient. They're focusing on what is my advantage, where are my patients, where is my fee, where where do I get my income. So if you are not focusing on the objective, total objective of healthy person, the system doesn't work. The concept of system in a theory is that it has a goal, system has a goal, and all elements are supposed to work towards that goal, that is the health of the people. If the elements or the people, the constituents of that system are thinking of themselves and not of that goal of the patient, then it will not work as a system. That was my learning, uh, and and not just mine, but I think that's how the uh, we began to almost worry about how to make it a system. Okay. So from an administrative point of view, they will like to have a system, so that naturally, because if we want to focus on ultimately the people and their health, the all these elements have to work consistently and sort of in coordinated fashion. So they so their perspective is to, we create a system from that, and that is what the health policy of 2000, the last two health policies have tried to do, is to bring everybody in some kind of a um, uh, loop, so that we all focus on the health of people and not on ourselves. Now, what does is it okay? Are you following it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So,
Um, so now why? So this was administered. So that was the third question. That second question that Shruti had asked me is that, how does this system, that chaos and that multiple provider system looks from the lens of public administration? And as we said, they wanted something structured because, one, because to remove these interstate rich poor differences, urban rural differences, so we all can focus, sort of combine our efforts into solving a major problem. a health problem. Now, how do they want to correct it? So the health administration does it devise basically four ways. One is strengthen the public sector healthcare, because the thought was if the public sector healthcare is strengthened strong, then others will fall in the low. People will come to uh, poor people, especially because it is free, will come to public health system, and they are our focus. So if you have a strong public health sector healthcare services, will automatically have a better system for the poor. So the emphasis, the objective was to have good care for the poor people or the disadvantaged people, trying to regulate the private sector. Okay? That was their second way of thinking. The third was, let's get, now by then we have started acknowledging that there are these RMs and the RPs, and then there are RMPs, and then there are Ayush doctors and others who are practicing. So let us get them in the supportive role of the larger public health system and assign them appropriate supportive roles. You can be, so we got uh, so the and but at the same time you can make sure that the traditional and home remedies are all and discouraged. We keep some Ayush, which is more structured medical system, but get them in a supportive role for the public health system, which is mainly allopathy, modern medicine, as we call them. And the last point was that hold them all accountable to their performance. So what they should do is kind of defined, and through that they were trying to get we our the health policies. The last two health policies were really effort to get all these different systems come together. Now, let's say how that has worked, that is working. It's a work in progress, nothing is complete, but it's a good thought because we have the systems are, beginning to talk with each other. We are beginning to think about integrated health system where there are good points from Ayurveda and good points from the modern medicine. They all come to and talk to each other with the hope that we will reduce the disease burden and get a better quality care. Now, how this has this work? Now, first point was strengthening the public health system. And we know that in last at least 10-15 years, a tremendous improvement in infrastructure, the equipments, and the COVID has helped a lot in that. A lot of equipment, supplies, staffing, that has much less, but still we have many positions vacant. But then there are incentives are given to use public health facilities, and we have more and more sort of community level workers like ashas and anganwadis, the female health workers, male health workers, or fewer female health workers who are providing reasonably good connect between the curative system, public health system, and the community. So that was the bringing of people to the public health system through these community level workers, and uh, building incentives, and as I said, for pregnant women there are incentives given, for immunization there are incentives are given, and so on. So uh, so that is how the strengthening of the public health system was done. Recently, in last since 2017, they are also getting public health system will get health centers and well-being centers, which are meant for promoting yoga and physical activities and so on. So part of the wellness concept is brought in along with the curative care, which is an important thing for people to become aware. Also, different insurance scheme has been brought in, more cheaper generic medicines to be used to reduce the cost of treatment. So through these various mechanism, the idea the effort has been to improve the public health infrastructure as well as reduce the cost for people, improve the accessibility, and some attention on the prevention part of it through education, health promotion, yoga, and including some Ayurveda medicines, which people were they find more acceptable. So that is part of the strengthening of public health sector is happening. The next is how, what do they do about regulating private sector? Or regulation private sector is not possible. That we have learned. But co-opting of private sector, earlier we used to have just the no, no, we don't want to even look at the private sector. Private sector means profit. Private sector means your exploitation. Private sector doesn't care for people. All those notions were there. But people have, yes, the public system has started co-opting the private sector. The Ayushman Bharat is one of the system where the many private hospitals are linked into the with the government, and the government pays for it. I don't know whether you have heard about, and this is not just Modi government. The efforts have been there even before. If you have learned about Chiranjeevi scheme, which was implemented in Gujarat, and then the same different names but same scheme was implemented in many states, where deliveries were performed. People were government paid for maternal care in private hospitals because we knew that there are not enough public hospitals. People have to have deliveries in private hospitals. The government paid for it, and that Gujarat showed a tremendous effect of that, and then the scheme um, got copied or adopted in many different states. In TB treatment, we used to use private sector doctors, encouraging them to give their TB treatment as per the protocol of the government program. Uh, Earlier, even for the diarrhea control and all, there used to be training programs for private doctors to not give medicine but promote the ORS or oral rehydration therapy. We also had a program for the reproductive health, uh, with again the private doctors were to reduce the cesarean section, cesarean hospitals operations. So there are programs where so the government collaborated with private hospitals to improve the quality of maternal care so that number of cesarean sections can be reduced. So there are examples of private sector involvement, and what is it that they're trying to do? Regularizing in the sense of their practices, not regularizing their income or anything, but their practices. The experience is again mixed. I remember I was part of not so much of Chiranjeevi scheme, but from a distance was a part of it. What used to happen with Chiranjeevi scheme was the private sector, the hospitals were given the same amount of uh, charge as was this a fixed charge for a delivery, for delivery which is sort of a cesarean delivery, and for the normal delivery, that two charges were there, and whatever may be the cost, the charge was fixed. Now, later we found out that private hospitals would always take sort of transfer the complicated deliveries to cases to the government hospitals, so that they got fairly good amount of money for doing normal deliveries, and the complicated deliveries they transferred to the government hospitals. So these kinds of behavioral problems we have seen in TB treatment, for example. We had part of that. They would refuse to follow the protocol, government set a protocol. They said, no, we don't think this is correct. We have our own medicine. We will prescribe those medicines. So it didn't go very far. But the fact that you brought the private practitioners to know what is government doing and why, Maybe some of them followed it, but to some extent, it was not a great involvement. Same way about diarrhea control. They will ORS, only ORS didn't work. They did give them medicines, and so the achievement of that was that private sector came closer. The animosity was there, that was reduced, but practices didn't change much. Uh, Now, the third aspect was the getting your Ayush and other the systems integrated with public system, and so there are two sort of roles that they played initially. Uh, we we did many of the state governments, they recognize the RMPs, that there are the registered medical practitioners. They given them, they were certified, and there are wides, and so they are on in all villages, and then they people go there as a first contact person. They officially recognize that, and especially for the poor. So what was done was they were involved very officially in promoting family planning, in promoting immunization, in referring HIV cases, and many of the sort of Kala Azar and uh, tropical diseases which they don't have treatment, and treatment is available with the government hospitals. So they were encouraged to refer them, and they were treated with the referral. See, there were also experiments done with involving the networks were formed of local RMPs. They were certified and trained them to treat RTI, STI. So through a collaboration with the private doctors who are the qualified doctors, who under their supervision these cases were treated by the RMPs. So slowly there was an effort made to understand them, improve their practices, and that was one of the good. I don't know how many of those. I think it was in Bihar. How many of those were continued? But that's also an effort that did help to reach the service to the as closer to the village as possible. Um, and the interestingly, what we also found, that government was doing it for the first time, but the private practitioners have been using them for a long time and very successfully. The way it was done was the private practitioners generally had built-in linkages with these RMPs and the pharmacists, and they would refer cases to this private doctor and get paid for it. So that was a regular business, and they benefited from that. But government cannot, because we cannot recognize them unless you certified. So there are they have started giving certification program was started, and then we even created our own RMPs. We call them CHD. I don't know whether anybody has ever come across these community health workers or the barefoot doctors. That was talked about a great deal, that we will have these young men and women at the village level. We will give them basic training of treating patients, and then they will communicate and refer cases when they need to be. So all those efforts were uh, were made to bring this large undocumented, unregistered system into the mainstream, and train them and get and control them. So we also, our primary health center appointed a third doctor in the primary health center who are from the Ayush, so that that person, he or she, mostly where he's, they were used for supervision, not for treatment, because our allopathy doctors don't like them to treat, but they would use their knowledge, I'm sure, and they did a great job of supervision. So they were brought in with the PSC, and we now have Bak a wellness center where they occupy a equally important position as a primary health center doctor, with its own clinic and program of treatment. So that's a effort has been done to bring the chaotic situation as much as a sort of as a responsive statement as possible. Now, how has that helped? Now let's look at this from the people's point of view. The poor has, to what extent has his effort to bring these different systems, coalescing them, make sense out of them, has helped the poor people, and that's the third question she has hit at that. And how have the marginalized and poor people benefited from that? Now, what the three things that we have in my sort of 50 years of working in the field is that what do the poor people want is a question. Okay. What do they want? They want to see that they are treated well, they are treated respectfully, and there has to be that the system is the what I think somebody has written, Dr. Reddy. He says that they want the system to have a good governance. Means they don't use the word governance, but we use the term effective management and a respect. What do they mean? What do we mean by good governance? It means that the public health system or whichever system, it must have ability to implement the stated policy. Okay. All programs have policies. Where a policy is, performance will be rewarded. Now, actually, practically, we are not able to reward the performance. People get promotion because they have some political pull or performance, or they may get because of the corruption. Now when the system has that, and you know that uh, your public health system is not able to implement the policies that it's set for itself, you don't have, the system is not reliable. Nobody benefits from system that is not reliable. So good governance is one. Okay. And what there is a very good example of how effective that good governance works. Just simply knowing that implementing the policy that you said will be implemented. What are those policies? Performance, personnel transfers, and where these are where the lot of corruption happens. If you implement those correctly, there is performance rewarded. And that example came from Maharashtra. There was one health secretary who simply did, they had some 29, 30 indicators of performance. Every month people came with the, in those days there were no computers and all that, they came, the PHC doctors came with their performance, they discussed what perform problems they had, who had not performed as per the target, what is needed to improve the target, or what their performance. Some equipment was bad, well, a worker was not working, a vehicle has gone bad, medicines were in short supply, whatever the problem was told, analyzed, and before the person went back to his district, the necessary government orders were issued to make that change. Okay. And that is part one. So when he went back, he said, okay, it does work. If I find know what my problem is, if I tell the system, tell the secretary this is a problem, it gets solved. Okay. This is a part of governance. Now you have to see how much it works now or wherever you are. The second part, they said if you perform, you will be rewarded. So whoever performed well got the position, they get transfers of the place where they wanted to be transferred, so that became an incentive to perform so that they can get a transfer. So its transfer did not depend on what my political connection was. Now these two things, and they made improved their performance double or three times more. And what they said was the government system, public system has such a slack that without adding any equipment, any staff, any system, you can double the performance because there is so much inefficiency already in resource utilization. So this is a good example. And if more and more, if this can be done at the district level. That's a question that Shruti is asking. At that level, if there is a commitment to performance, the other and I could go some of many of such examples we have. Now there is a second part, that is effective management. So what is that means? So that activities are decided, and people have to be the workers have to be in certain place on that particular day, uh, to provide services. So they have to be there. If the weighing scale has to work, it has to work. If the vaccines have to be there, they have to be there. These are the activities. And so monitoring of those activities, does it happen or not? We don't need policy for that, it's happening or not, and taking corrective action. Now, first action we have seen is at the secretary level, where their incentives are given, performance is improved, and so on. These are operational level. Vehicle is working, vehicle is sent, vaccines are there or not. They're very operational details. People have come on time or not, people have gone in time or not. But what it does is, uh, uh, it improves. People see it as a something that our system is reliable. That is, if I go to the primary health center or sub center, ANM will be there on the day, on Tuesday. She will be there, I know. So I will go. Now, many and that time no excuses. So we had a project, we did that, and that also became later a model for uh, today's what they call health, that village health and sanitation committees. That is a precursor to that. This block, Parner block in Maharashtra, there we find that, obviously, villages which were away from sub-centers did not have enough, uh, did not have, their performance was lower, their service level was less. It has nothing to do with poor or rich. Those who are away from uh, health center. So we asked the A&M, what is it that, why is it so? She said, they don't want to come that far. Sure enough. Now, how do we go there? We, well, they are supposed to go there, but where do we examine them? Where do you provide service? There is no facility. So then they themselves came up with the idea that if we have a small kit with some medicine, some, now they have it, small kit, we can carry it there, and we have, at the village will provide area, space for holding the clinic on particular day, where people will come to the clinic and all services will be provided. It was important that many people will come there. ANC care is given, the immunization take place, children, everything has to be done on that day. So they needed supervisors to work with them. They needed the local people and so on. So all that was planned in the partner on the, and then a couple of issues came, and these are important things to think about when we are talking of reaching the poor. The two important things came. We said, if are you able to reach your uh, villages on time, like 9 o'clock? And there was some supervisors who said, no, no, well, yes, we will reach. How will you reach? The bus doesn't come till about 10 o'clock. Yes, they were not telling us that they will reach at 11 o'clock. They will say we will reach, somehow we will reach. But we did not, the district, when I said a part of it is a district manager, district health officer were involved. They said, no, no, we don't want your, somehow we will reach, we will make arrangements. And so the some local level transfers took place, and who were nearer to the center will go there, this person will go somewhere else. But the logistics was worked out to see that the healthcare provider is as much convenience as the people. So we are only looking at, it's not important enough to look at only what people will get. It's also important to see what the healthcare providers' problems are, what are the A&M's problems, what are the health workers' problems, and try to solve those if you want a happy worker to give a happy services. Now, that experiment was so successful that people would come from Pune to this Parner block to get service, because on particular day a full range of ANC care was available, and the performance in all villages went up. So it is possible to to look at this effective management, and that to be very responsive. What is it test tells you? It being responsive to the needs of not just patients or people, but also of your staff, of your doctors, of your system, to see that everybody is benefiting from that. Don't leave anybody out, because anybody is unhappy will spoil the entire system. So that was a part of our effective management. So that's the responsiveness of the system, that they will repair the equipment if it is out of order. They will find a solution if you don't have access. They will make sure that you have the medicines that you need. All that is part of the management effectiveness. And the third thing that poor people want is respect from the client, especially the poor. And you might have seen many surveys. Again and again, people ask. We all keep saying that people don't go to this for the healthcare because people don't have money. Poor people, but poor people never say that I did not take this treatment because I didn't have money. Very small person, 3%, 4%, usually not. They don't go if they have to wait for long, and they're treated badly. The most complaints about public health system has been that we are treated badly, we are ignored, we are disrespected, and so on. That's the study that Shruti mentioned. People also very worried about being cheated, and they go as a because they go as a unpaid, not paying patients. They do experience disrespect, and I have seen that. You would also seen. I have heard and people telling me directly, you mean they want free service and also respect? We don't have time for them. They get respect from private people because they pay. They don't pay me, so why should I respect them? So it is what people, our public system forgets is that we are getting paid also by money that they have paid as taxes, that government is not paying. This is our money that gets paid, that is their salary is being paid. Now our poor people cannot tell them this. Sometimes they don't even know this. But unless that since that awareness is not there, there is the behavior of disrespect. uh, and that's all that poor people want to see, especially that they are not badly treated. There are a couple of things we used to, some studies we had done in Karnataka and places, asking people as to why they don't go to the uh, PHC, those who did not go to the PHC, or why went to the private. And these are all done with poor people. And then they said they are afraid because there's a class difference of people working in the hospital and these poor people, and they want to have assurance that they will be even allowed to come in. Okay? So they are looking for, they will go only to places where they know somebody. So even a peon in the hospital, why did you go to that hospital? Because I know a peon, he will I will go with him. And so that kind of assurance that you will get entry, you will get some treatment, you will not be cheated because I know somebody. Now, in our health system, that is the most missing part as far as the poor people are concerned, and that was to recognize. Um, and that Asha's role, you people would probably not know or have forgotten, Asha, who today we think about her as a worker, and her role was meant as that bridge because she is from community and she would be accepted both by people and by system health system. So she will take this woman to the hospital, and hospital will welcome the Asha as her person and treat the patient that she has brought with her with respect. So there will be comfort. The idea about Asha was not to take her that money and so on, is to give comfort to the poor people, so that at the large facility like a hospital, district hospital, and even community level hospital, that they don't feel lost, they don't feel scared, and that they don't get mistreated. Now that has a lot of many places. I don't know how you should see at what happens in your district. In many places, the hospitals just keep the ashas out. The people have forgotten that role. They say, "Oh, you don't come. We will take care of the patient. You don't have to come." And then we have converted them into workers, so that given them incentives. You bring her here, you will get 200 rupees. You bring get her to do primary immunization, you get another 100 rupees. So people, when that money transaction come, people have started trusting them less. I mean, you are not going there because you like me or you are my companion, but you are going there because you are getting this money. So that has to some extent spoiled that idea about making people comfortable. But still, it's not as bad as it used to be. So what is it? So there's a respect. So there are three things. If I have to reimagine this public health system, there are three things I imagine: that the system has to be responsive, that means taking the system, public system, that is reliable, that it does what it says it will do, it is responsive, that is it will see that what needs to be done is done, that the processes are in place, and it is respectful. These are the three R's that I would like to reimagine the system will do. And all these three have quite aware that they, these are all three are very important for the last mile, for the disadvantaged groups, and they are also the basic things requirements for reaching the last mile, because if they want to come to the system, they are the last mile. They have to have the confidence that the system will treat me respectfully, that it is reliable, they will not cheat me, they will not exploit me, they will treat me respectfully. Now, the and there is a so the and worry is about, we have to understand these three R's in the kind of this sort of environment that they live in, and we have no explain or sort of experience of that environment. And the first is, they worry about it, that is that caste and caste mainly. See, if they belong to a coming from a disadvantaged class caste, they always worry about being treated, or they interpret it to say that I am not treated well because I belong to this caste. And sometimes they are used, they are right also, not always, but sometimes they are right. um, and they prefer to go to private. So you would ask them, why don't they private doctors treat them? They don't consider caste. No, they don't, because for them, being able to pay for the service is equalizer. I'm paying for the service, you are paying for the service, so it doesn't matter which caste I belong to. And some private doctors also treat them, as I said earlier, it's a bread and butter. I was told many times in Karnataka, oh, these poor patients are our bread and butter. We give them incentive, no, we discount in our rates so that they can tell others to come to us. So they are actually welcoming them because they get paid, and that's a good source of income for them. So that is one part of it, is the social disadvantage does affect. The other is that tremendous political interference in the public system. Somehow, I have seen that at in many states, and I would like an update from you people as to what is the situation now. That there used to be a tendency that public program means government's program means my program. So if they are a public servant, the politician, local politician will think they are my servants. I had some doctors crying saying that the local leader, he uses me for bringing his pan and other things. They think, why, hey doctor, why are you not coming to see me at home? So they treat him like a personal sort of servant, because they have authority to transfer them, harass them, exploit them, and so on. So it is not and they have no easy recourse to complain. Who can they go? Who would they voice their problem? And we haven't got any option for that kind of. We have now for option for um, this sexual harassment. There are committees to look at any small sexual harassment. There is an inquiry. We have to go through a big inquiry into that. And this kind of political harassment, there are no such voices option for them. So that is one area that we need to worry if about, and that affects the service providers a great deal more than the service, that is clients. And then of course the economic constraints, and that you will know that if the funds are less, naturally there will be more and more controls. So budgets will not release. The budgets are there, but funds are not released. People don't get their traveling TADA bills paid. I And then there are other delaying practices. There are inquiries set up. Now, I had one case once. A we used to have a system where each PH subcenter would be decentralization. A subcenter would be given 10,000 rupees to buy medicines and meet the local needs. So she doesn't have to worry about wait for the small purchases needed. Iron folic acids are finished or some painkiller is needed, she can buy and locally using that money. But many PVNMs did not use that money. And the reason, I said, well, so many inquiries. The auditor the accountant will ask me, where is the bill? Where is why did you buy at this rate? The pharmacy doesn't give, is it a really real bill or false bill? So who wants? So a couple of times I will pay for my own pocket, but how long? I will not pay. You stop. So the money was never used. The money gets same kind of money you are giving to their ANMs are getting for this community health health committees at the village level. They have also small amount of money. It doesn't get used for the community's needs because of this constraint of there so many questions will be asked. How am I going to answer? And that kills their sort of enthusiasm as well as any initiative they may have. That And then they behave like, whoever tells me to spend, I will spend that money to whatever you want me to do. I don't want any responsibility. So so these are this is a so if we we want the health care provider to be active. We want them to respond to the needs of the people. We want them to be want the community to be involved. But if we are not able to trust them, we are not able to say and not willing to trust them, then of course none of these R's will work. You can't we can't get respect. You can't get them to be responsible. You cannot get them to be reliable and so on. They will just work like keeping their skin, so that when they retire, they don't have to lose their pension. That's the main. Now very quickly I'll finish. Is Are you okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, so now the questions they're asking is what? So this sort of large system we are talking about, I don't know why we think that it is not resilient. I think our system it's always in the dormant, and in the COVID time, it has proven that when push comes to shove, when there is a challenge, they can get up and do the everybody comes together and performs. So it is, and then it can change, which is flexible, but political will is needed there. You have to be flexible in that, you have to be trusting in that, so we can all come together at that time. But then when that is over, and there are many situations, we deal with that with the polio vaccine, polio campaign, we dealt with that in family planning, we dealt with that in many other uh, any disaster situation. The system works beautifully. That time they come together, they forget about their personal enmities, problems, interests, and they only keep working for the goal. And how do we now make that um, experience as a normal? That is the question. Resilience is not, in my view, Indian system is quite resilient if you allow it to function as it should. Um, there is a the so what are the things, how these are the experiences I shared with you are mainly at the district level, people below, not at the policy level. And so that means there is a scope even at the product level to keep the system very active, proactive, using, become support, sort of uh, for be able to reach the last mile, as they say, the last person who needs the system. It is capable of it. So there are a couple of specific ideas I can give actionable, and that we had tried and worked. One is that you use the supportive networks. That means at the rural level, there are the self-help groups, there are professional associations, there are community-based organizations that we call CBOs. Then there are uh, the, and you get them involved in sort of getting the services to the last, and they are that's the most organized local level unit, but it has to be then make sure that we do not overshadow their activities. Self-help groups are very involved in their financial deals, so if you want them to keep record, and if you want to go to villages and you want to keep visit houses, and you want to them do something which will take away their time, no, that will not work. But minimum involvement, but getting the messages where they should, such groups will work quite fine. But they need to be then it must be honored. They must be their performance is to be recognized, and that's what works well. You can, lot of new technologies like video conferencing and telephones and all those are now available to reach such unacceptable, unreachable people, because everybody has a phone, everybody has a ability to uh, communicate. And the third is that I would say is the keep solving the problem. See, resilience improves when if you solve the problems. Uh, if as we located in our Maharashtra case, if the people have problem reaching the clinic because the bus service is not there, you have to find a solution for that. People have problem because their equipment is not working. We have to find a solution for that. So finding problem solving is a part of management system. If the system does not solve the problems that the people face, either people or the patient, they cannot you cannot make that system work or perform or give the results that you want. So now, so I now stop here. There are some sort of experiments that we did. We could talk about it, but let me hear from you. What the if you have any comments and questions and experiences to share. No,
Shifa?
Shruti, nobody has any question.
No, Shifa has raised her hand.
Hmm?
Shifa, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hello, Nirmala ma'am. Thank you for the class or reimagining on public health system. My question is specifically related to the youth and adolescent demography. How are we seeing it? Because right now, I'm posted at Alirajpur, and one more fellow Atre is also posted in Alirajpur, and we tried our best to locate adolescent-friendly health clinic in Alirajpur, and we couldn't find any. So, like that will be the entry point to most of the youth or adolescent population to the health system. So, how are you like thinking? Like, we would like to receive your opinion regarding that.
You couldn't find what entry for them in your health system, or you couldn't
Yeah.
find adolescent.
Adolescent-friendly health clinics that is supposed to be a part of like RKSK program.
Mm-hmm. Um, was one of my colleagues, Dr. Alka Barua, used to work with adolescent health clinics and getting training doctors to respond. My own experience in this field is our care providers don't think of adolescent as a separate population at all. They don't think that they have any special needs. They see it as they recognize children, they recognize adults. And what is this adolescent? And so there is uh, a outside within the clinic that doesn't work. I mean, outside programs are there within the school or through NGOs who work with adolescent. They have specially where the doctors are called to take care of the problem. But within the health system, you probably have to go along. There will be some more time needed to get adolescent recognition that adolescent group is has its own unique set of problems, and they are not right now. Now, is that does the government have any focus on that? Which we are UP, may?
So we looked at the RKSK program. So it is supposed to have a AFHC clinic at the district level. So we talked to some of the people in the department also, and they also said that there is no AFHC as such.
There
So
is no,
right now, adolescent friendly health clinic as
no,
such.
no.
So, like, we are also thinking what to do about it because, like, through RKSK program, it is supposed to have an adolescent-friendly health clinic. But I don't know why it's not there in Alirajpur.
They don't have because their need is health need is not recognized as separately,
Okay.
and they wouldn't even know what to do with them if you bring them. So when we were working there, Alka Barua and I, they had a specific they had even 2 year program with the doctors in Gujarat, where the training program and telling them what the adolescent problems are and how to deal with and how to sort of treat them as individuals with special needs. As soon as the training is done, it's finished. I mean, they had
Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I have, but are there any NGOs in the area which are doing it? Because we one uh, option is to work at the community level, like the in each community there are these Nehru about groups, or there are the youth clubs are there, and the youth clubs can become sort of a community level CBO, like that the community level uh, organization, who then invite these doctors to, on a particular day, to care, to provide whatever treatment or whatever sort of advice and issues that need to be discussed. But you would be very disappointed because most people don't know. So we'll have to find, if you are interested in that program, we have to find people who recognize this issue and have.
Okay.
I can find some training material and all that which is developed, and who are then willing to get into. But this is, it's not at all attended to. I agree.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Is it possible to do it as a separate through the? Uh, this is where I think I would share a little bit about the work that we had this at the community involvement, where there is a community health group. No, it was not community. It was called uh, community volunteer. I forgot what is that. It's a community health committee. It's a health committee at the village level, village health committee. They were sort of organized. They had been organized, and initially we gave them idea. This was in Karnataka. We worked with something like 65 blocks in that area. So these committees were told about different problems. Like for example, adolescent problem would be one of them. So we were sort of resource people, but not actually providing service. And they would encourage to organize some activity at the village level. First thing we did was no giving them money, but they got some prestige of being a member of that committee, and they got some recognition in that area. And they generated their own resources, not money. They will never take money because there is always the problem with money. But they will take resources, like somebody will organize something, somebody will give food, and so on. And they would bring the doctor, organize this, say, uh, eye camp, then for the pregnant women, for adolescent. That's when I learned about this Nehru clubs they had for adolescent health. They would organize the meeting, and then the local doctor will come there to um, talk about it or give them advice and so on. And then the interesting part was each month they were supposed to do such an activity. In every 6 months, we gathered them in sort of and projected their work at the district hospital, district medical hospital, district medical officer will come. He will listen to everything that they have done. Then he will praise them. The newspaper will report it, and that was good enough to keep them going for 2 3 years with different activities. So you can try some such sort of motivational to get the community level involved.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Deeply, you can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the insightful session. मैम जो आपने रेफरल के बारे में बात किया था तो आई हैड एन एक्सपीरियंस टू शेयर विद रिस्पेक्ट टू दैट so in Mahakumbh what I am placed in the Prayagraj district and in Mahakumbh we had come up along with the surveillance team we had come up with this real time bed availability portal जिसमें जितने भी फैसिलिटीज मेला एरिया में सेटअप हुए थे और बाहर जो हमारे डिस्ट्रिक्ट हॉस्पिटल्स और बाहर के जो फैसिलिटीज थे तो उसमें वी वर ट्राइंग की जो बेड अवेलेबिलिटी डेटा है और वो रियल टाइम पे रिपोर्ट हो एंड इन दैट वन सेक्शन वाज आल्सो लाइक step down. So that was an interesting option in our trainings. Nobody paid very much attention to that thing also. Uh, कि स्टेप डाउन पे कोई ज्यादा फोकस नहीं किया गया था बट इट वाज अ वेरी रेलेवेंट ऑप्शन ओवर देयर कि जो अगर हॉस्पिटल से हम अपने लाइक वी कुड डाउन लाइक send the patient down if the improvement had happened because resources to stars ही थे like district even in that one central hospital was there which was a super speciality thing so I could relate that in terms of referral and like we have a long way to establish that. बट मैम एक चीज आई वांटेड टू आस्क कि ये ई हॉस्पिटल जैसे इनिशिएटिव्स जो है एबीडीएम है जिसमें पेशेंट का आभा आईडी बनकर सब चीजें लाइक एटलीस्ट द मेडिकल हिस्ट्री एंड दैट इज अपलोडेड सो और व्हाट डू यू थिंक कैन इट प्ले अ रोल इन स्ट्रेंथनिंग द रेफरल मैकेनिज्म because that portal, though that step down option was not being utilized well, but जो उसमें मेडिकल हिस्ट्री सब जगह पे उस पे अपलोड करने का ऑप्शन था so that was being effectively used at some of the health facilities so that the doctor could like use the uh, like prescription and other medical history from that portal itself.
If they are, I mean, yes, answer is certainly it will help if people are. First thing is whether anybody else has access to that information. I don't know whether who all had access to that information, because there will be a question of privacy and so on. So, would like to know more about it. The other is that. One thing that we have found is that each hospital or each center doesn't believe in whatever history is recorded somewhere else. They would want to do it again. They will want to do the blood test again. They will want to do X-rays again, and so on. Especially both private doctors, public doctors, and they don't read other people's sort of prescriptions, or people don't write the prescriptions. They don't. Have you seen people, doctors writing? They don't write the diagnosis. They will write just a prescription. You ask them, why are you doing this? Don't know. Um, and I do not know why they don't write. But there has, whether in your system, whether it is all being recorded that way, we don't know. But yes, I mean, that was supposed to be the role of medical record, that it gets other people use it, and it can reduces better it sort of reduces expenditure for patient for doing the same test again and again, as well as a better treatment. But do you know whether other people can download that step down?
Ma'am, yes, like वो पूरा information was downloadable at that time. That was the portal was applicable in the Mahakumbh, but now it will like there are efforts being made so that it can be operationalized at a much wider level after the Mahakumbh. But Abha ID also like that's this e अस्पताल at least it वो medical history और DST तो उसमें डालना ही रहता है मैम तो वो कितना इफेक्टिव हो सकता है.
अच्छा, दैट विल बी इंटरेस्टिंग. मुझे भी देखना पड़ेगा. मालूम नहीं है, बट यू टेल मी, एजुकेट मी.
Ma'am, I also had one more question. Ma'am, this was this interesting case which had come up for the Apollo Hospital in Delhi, which is made on the common ground lands, and the Supreme Court and High Court both had intervened. And a lot of data was scrutinized that how much, like, वो भी जो पूरा hospital है, is made on the common land, panchayat lands. So, आज के time में, how can like that accountability also lies on the private sector? And this case, what do you think that how can this case contribute as a mechanism for making the private sector more accountable rather than just only partnerships?
Well, more of certainly the health department is doing for the more partnership, because we don't have much control over them. But the legal system is there, which is which can hold them accountable. The tax system, they can hold them accountable. There is much larger system that can hold them accountable, and that they whether they are doing or not, and the corruption plays a big role into all this. They would pay, and you know that uh, there are how they would sort of make sure that they will get what they want. So we have not talked about corruption, but it's the thing that sort of kills the whole. It's the cancer of the society, as they say. Uh, and that's what, so you can hold somebody accountable only if you are above doing anything illegal. But if you yourself are not, then you can't hold other people accountable. Not even our judiciary able to do it if they some of them are not. If they don't hold them above law, yeah, they have to be in trouble. But health system cannot do that. No, health system has a limited scope for holding anybody accountable, especially private doctors. Anybody else? I think it's already more than we have gone beyond your evening, and we don't want to eat up your dinner time. Shruti, is it done? Hello.
Shruti, you're on mute.
Sorry, there's been a network issue, but yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, for this lovely session. It was really inspiring, but I think Mahima also had raised her hand.
Yeah,
So, ma'am, if you have 5 minutes, could we do this or
I
we?
have no problem. You just because I'm worried about you people. I work whole day and then it is beyond time. That's all.
No, no, ma'am.
Okay.
But I think we can wait. But Mahima, would you like to ask your question?
yeah, quickly. So I was having a conversation in our office today. So I've been placed in Mandla district in Madhya Pradesh, and I was just inquisitive about the fact that how we have extremely limited healthcare opportunities available, and if there is a high risk case, the hospitals tell the person or the patient's family to go to Jabalpur, which is 2 hours ahead of Mandla, or Nagpur, which is 5 hours ahead of Mandla. So I was just curious that how can we make this account settled and we can do something in the Mandla district itself so that, we can save lives,
When you say we means who?
as in the healthcare system.
Yeah. I mean, the UP has, I hear that has invested a lot on improving the infrastructure and facilities and so on. I don't know whether it is. There's another thing that has happened, and I must share it with you, is that earlier we used to have very easy access to government. We could walk into government hospital, we could look data, we could analyze their problems. Now we have been almost all NGOs and outsiders and have been kept out. Nobody's even entered that. So
Right.
I really, that's why my sort of gap between what is happening in the field now and what needs to happen. But yes, I mean that's where they have to see if there is a desire to solve the problem. There must be all the sort of facilities are being developed. They should be able to. I don't know whether you see people are. Uh, Interested in solving, or they think it's okay if one woman dies, so what. Uh,
Hmm.
and that has been, I mean, many years ago I was in UP, but health secretary said to me, oh, you are making such a big deal about maternal care, so what if one woman die, few women die, birth rate with the population will be less. It was such a shock. And now of course he will not say, but deep down, it's a male dominated system, and many people still probably in that area don't think they have to work hard for that. Like Chiranjeevi scheme in Gujarat, for example, that was a health secretary who was hell bound on getting, see, making sure that private sector or somewhere this woman will get treatment. It doesn't, where it gets, it doesn't matter. And so the knowing where the treatment can be done locally, which are the other hospitals which can treat, referring them, all that is a work, and somebody has to feel the need to do that.
Right. Thank you, ma'am.
Are you able to do that?
I'm still researching, doing my reading, and just few introductory questions here and there. I'm yet to visit the field. But yeah, facts that people state that how there's no ENT facility available, there's no radiology department available, is obviously shocking since I come from a place in Delhi which has certainly better medical facilities at our disposal.
But you can also find out all other facilities in the area where things may be available.
Sure, I'll look into that.
Creating a directory of facilities to say that,
Right.
and then people themselves will go even if government doesn't sell because life is
Absolutely.
precious.
It is.
It's a lot of
Thank you.
it is information gap. We are so sort of we don't ask what is there in the neighbor. It's what we just see what I have, and if I don't have, I complain. But the neighbor has that. You can go and get it from there. No?
Right. Thank you, ma'am.
And that's what makes it a system. If you think there is an objective of getting people health, and then you search all facilities are at the not at your exponent, but it is at the service for the people. If you perceive your whole system in that way, you'll find solution because there are resources spread, and it's a matter of finding it with that goal of reaching helping poor, not benefiting from them.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't know whether I met the requirement of the session, but I enjoyed it. So.
I guess this is it, I suppose. I'll share, ma'am, if you're okay with it, I'll share your email ID. Maybe some of us would like to be in touch.
I would really love it. Yeah.
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 And if you have any additional questions, you can write to ma'am. And yeah, let's stay in touch. And it was lovely listening to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming. And maybe if you're in Delhi and all our cohort is here, we can do an in-person session as well.
Sure. We would like to keep in touch and maybe learn through you what you people are doing as well as about what's happening.
Uh,
I do feel kind of isolated. As I said, government seem to have closed their doors. Is there to nobody wants. We have some projects, where we are supposed to do the assessment of how the equipment and facilities created by the government are being used to, but no access. The last 2 years we have not been able to do this work.
Really disheartening.
It is. It is. It is hardening. Anyway, but all the best, and I hope some useful things, ideas we were able to share. And if I can be of any assistance, help, idea sharing, or even analysis, I would be happy to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. For
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.